The youngest kids coming back to school after the pandemic are facing some big issues.
The suicide rate of 10 to 14-year-olds is incredibly high, and it is a historical high nationwide.
Inside the school buildings, counselors are on the front lines of a tough battle.
In Portland Public Schools and at this school, I would say regularly have students who are contemplating some kind of self-harm.
All this week, we're talking about the state of mental health in schools. Today, Christine Pitawanich visits Sitton Elementary in the St. John's neighborhood of North Portland to get a sense of what kids there are dealing with.
We don't shy away from big feelings and problems.
Here's the story.
Does anybody else want a stuffy?
There's this stuffy over here too. And then there's a crab over there. You want this one? You want the llama?
10-year-old Dibera and Uri, along with 7-year-old Sita, have an insider's perspective on what it's like here at Sitton Elementary in North Portland.
Are there any subjects that stress you out more?
Math.
Me too. Me too.
But dig a little deeper, and elementary life can involve some hard stuff.
I've been bullied.
Dibera says it helped knowing there was an adult she could talk to.
I just felt more safe, better.
One of those adults, Deb Bloom, a school counselor of 14 years.
As a school counselor, I teach in the classroom, so that differentiates me from a social worker or a school psychologist generally.
She's having to teach kids how to interact with adults and each other in a healthy way.
We have core values at our school. Is that a super important part of our school?
Yeah.
She says even kids in elementary school have anxiety, and it's typical at this age. The difference these days is she's seeing more of it after the isolation and stress of the pandemic.
They're coming with concerns about friendships, managing big emotions, problem solving.
Bloom says she regularly sees students who contemplate self-harm.
We don't shy away from big feelings and problems.
To help staff here normalize talking about mental health, Bloom and others are trying to give students tools.
We have posters in our 4th and 5th grade bathrooms with the new suicide hotline that was created this past year. I'm in the classrooms every week teaching social skills and teaching mindfulness.
And it's thanks to that kind of attention that little Sita now knows how to handle conflict on the playground with a concept called a bug and a wish.
If someone keeps mimicking you in something, you could say, it bugs me when you mimic me and I wish you would be nicer.
Meantime, Uri is grateful for the grief group at the school. He had someone close to him pass away.
It feels good expressing of what you've been through, and the day from when I let it go out, and I felt just better.
Walk through the halls, and this year these sensory walls are brand new. Kids pass and can run their hands through interesting textures or jump on bubble pads on the ground.
It's a place for them to take a break or engage in a way that gives them a sense of calm.
We spent $30,000 on our kindergarten classrooms just this past fall so that we could start every day with play.
They say play, what kids largely missed out on during online learning, is important for brain development and mental health. And while a lot is being done with mental health staff here coming together monthly to learn and share practices, more help is always needed.
The American School Counseling Association recommends a 250-to-1 ratio for counselors to students. And at our school, we're really lucky because we're about as close to that as a school gets in the metro area at 340-to-1 school counselor. As a mental health advocate, we can do all this work here. But some kids need more than the schools can offer.
Christine joins me now, and again, very interesting story. And the counselor talked about trying to connect kids to outside services, but we've all done stories on the lack of mental health out there in the community. So were they able to connect?
Well, Deb Bloom says in the Tri-County area, there just aren't right? Enough resources for those kids that need that extra help outside of the classroom. And the deal is, if they don't get the help that they need, sometimes it trickles back into the classroom and affects their ability to learn and their peers too.
So maybe some do, but some don't, and that's a problem. What was it like to actually talk with these kids? I know you got to sit down with them.
Yeah, I mean, 7 years old, 10 years old, you think, oh, what problems could a kid that age possibly have? They're going on the playground, whatever. But what struck me was they do have big feelings and problems that I think us adults would have trouble dealing with. You know, Uri, you know, he lost someone close to him in the pandemic, and he talked about having these feelings and being able to talk about it and let it out. But after we talked on camera, he had talked about how he was kind of scared to open up like that among his peers, to talk about such heavy feelings. But once he did, it was super cathartic. I mean, there's bullying, right? That really affects you emotionally and all that. So I think these kids sometimes can be dismissed because they're so young, but they're dealing with big issues. And counselors like Deb and like others across the district are really helping them put a voice to what they're feeling.
Okay, interesting stuff. We'll look forward to tomorrow. And tomorrow's segment will focus on West Sylvan Middle School. And then Thursday, we work our way up to high school at Lincoln High, followed by takeaways and your reaction on Friday. Some interesting bills are making their way through Oregon's legislature right now. One would allow motorcycle riders to ride in between cars on the freeway when traffic is slowed down to a crawl. It's called lane splitting, or it's sometimes known as lane filtering. It's when a motorcycle rides along the line in between the lanes of traffic and moves around cars. Motorcycle riders have been trying to get it legalized for years. 2 years ago, they got really close. A bill to legalize lane splitting passed the legislature with bipartisan support, but former Oregon Governor Kate Brown said, no. She was not convinced that it was safe and vetoed the bill. But now we have a new governor and some new lawmakers, so supporters are at it again. Senate Bill 422 would allow lane splitting for motorcycles, but only under certain conditions. It's only on the freeway and only when traffic is slowed down, going less than 10 miles an hour. And in order to drive around the cars, the motorcycles themselves would not be allowed to go more than 10 miles an hour. Motorcycle riders say it is safer for them than trying to get a bike through stop-and-go traffic, and that being able to get out of the way quickly can keep them from ending up in the middle of a crash. Hundreds of people have submitted testimony to lawmakers overwhelmingly in support of the measure.
I ride my motorcycle to work, which is about a 30 to 60 commute each way. One of the most dangerous situations I face as a rider is stop-and-go traffic because I don't get a legal exit strategy. When I ride, I have to be constantly vigilant, aware of my environment, identify threats, and formulate exit strategies. I ride as though I am invisible to drivers around me because they are the threat I cannot control.
But among the opposition, there's some pretty big names basically warning that you could get killed doing this. The Portland Bureau of Transportation says they oppose lane splitting because they think it's dangerous. They wrote, "We continue to see motorcyclists disproportionately killed in traffic crashes. Over the past 5 years, 46 motorcyclists have died in Portland, accounting for 17% of all traffic fatalities in that time. While the lane splitting parameters in SB 422 are narrow, we are concerned that the practice of lane splitting would spill onto city streets." AAA also filed testimony against the bill, writing that they're concerned about inexperienced riders trying to lane split, not enough space between vehicles, unpredictable traffic, and lane splitting while under the influence. And they think it'll be dangerous for law enforcement to try and enforce the rules. AAA also says the number of motorcycle riders killed in Oregon has been growing in the past 5 years, with, get this, 95 people killed last year alone on motorcycles. Motorcycle lane splitting is broadly legal in California and legal in Utah, Arizona, and Montana under specific circumstances. So what do you think about this? Should motorcycles be allowed to drive around cars when traffic is stalled? Send us an email and share your thoughts. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave us a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. Let's stay in Salem for a few moments now to talk about another bill, the legislature that has a lot of you fired up. We're talking about Senate Bill 4. It's to attract semiconductor companies who are looking to expand thanks to the Federal CHIPS Act that opens up tens of billions of dollars for these companies. And if it's passed, this law, Senate Bill 4, could bring the biggest change in land use law in Oregon in 50 years. It's aimed at helping expand the state's silicon forest by making land quickly available for the semiconductor industry. The bill would give Governor Tina Kotek superpowers when it comes to land use. It would allow her to designate certain plots of land needed for chip factories and then take away all the land use restrictions that would ordinarily make it impossible to build there. We used an example yesterday in Hillsboro, but in theory, it could happen anywhere in Oregon as long as it's near the urban growth boundaries. If there's prime piece of land that the chip companies want but is reserved for agriculture, the governor could basically wave a magic wand and take away the restrictions, allowing the building of that semiconductor plant. Lawmakers that are part of the Joint Committee on Semiconductors told us that it's clear that Oregon does have to change some land use laws if we're going to compete for a piece of that $52 billion in federal money that's up for grabs to boost the chip industry. An amendment being offered for tomorrow in Salem on Senate Bill 4 would allow the governor to designate 2 plots of land that are any size, no limit on how big, where chip factories could be built. It would also allow for 10 other smaller plots of land. The bill also sets aside $200 million for companies that want to apply for the federal CHIPS Act money. That has to be used for preparing a site for a new plant or research and development or partnering with higher ed to help train future workers. And there was a pretty good split among viewers, you who support the bill and those of you who are adamantly against it. Let's start with those against first. Tom says hell no to giving governor that kind of power. Oregon has lost its long-admired leadership in the chip industry. That ship has sailed. We just don't have the land that's needed to build new factories. Now we should figure out how to use our resources to find new cutting-edge fields. Eileen says, the whole story is so awful that it makes me so angry it just takes my breath away. Absolutely, the governor should not have that kind of power to take land that is already outside the land use plan. Are we going to eat concrete and chips?
I'm totally pro-farmland. I've lived in places where there is none left. It's terrible, and there's no reason why we can't work around whatever problems corporations have and not destroy our environment at the same time. Thanks.
And Robert chimed in. Giving one person the power to change land use willy-nilly is an invitation for corruption. Mike agreed. I'm a lifelong Democrat and progressive. I don't deny that there may need to be adjustments to the UGB to address economic growth. However, to give the governor unfettered power to make UGB changes is wrong, 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 if not politically insane. UGB is the urban growth boundary. Another argument that a lot of you shared was similar to what Mike said. You recognize there is an upside to these chip plants, but the focus should not be here in the metro area.
As to expanding high-tech in Oregon, has anyone heard of the Dalles, Madras, Pendleton, LeGrand, Ontario? Obviously, the folks in the Tri-County area have not heard of them before. There's plenty of space over there. Thank you.
And a few of you are ahead of us on this topic, having listened to much of the public testimony yourselves. It appears there could be a possible compromise with land available inside some urban growth boundaries.
We don't need to pit 2 good things against each other, farmland versus high-quality jobs. There's testimony from Wilsonville, McMinnville, Redmond, and the Rogue Valley that they have land inside the boundaries ready to go for semiconductor expansion. Why is the state overlooking these opportunities? We can have both for a better Oregon. Land use isn't the issue.
But then there are those of you who want this bill pushed through the legislature to ensure that Oregon's tech industry does not fall behind.
I think the semiconductor investments and the changes to land use to make them happen are the most important thing that Salem can do during this legislative session. We are falling behind other states in our ability to create a competitive technology industry in the state of Oregon. And without competitive industry, we don't have a tax base to do the other things that we want to do to make Oregon a great place to live. It is nice that people have all sorts of goals around livability, We have to balance those things with the money to pay for it.
And Vicki says, move on. More jobs and creation of important products that are needed. Wake up, Oregon. Take advantage of these opportunities. Washington State would. And Barry chimed in. Go west on Highway 26 or Highway 30 or south on I-5 and look around. Who is it that thinks we're going to miss the ryegrass or just plain grass that might end up creating jobs and tax revenue instead? How about thinking about the future of Oregon instead of what was in the minds of government officials 50 years ago? No matter which side of this issue you're on, Senate Bill 4 is one that we are going to follow very closely. The next hearing is tomorrow at 5 o'clock. We'll keep you posted on what happens. By the way, I just want to add a few thoughts here. Yesterday, based on our story, some of you emailed in assuming that I'm against Senate Bill 4. I got to tell you, that's not correct. Here's my opinion on this. While it is painful to take land outside the urban growth boundary and plant some chip facilities there, I do agree with those who say it is necessary. Our land use laws have worked very well. It's why you can drive 30 minutes in just about any direction from the Portland area when it's not rush hour and be in farmland or forests. But there's a reason that Intel is sinking $20 billion into 2 chip factories in Ohio. They're building on 1,000 acres that the Ohio governor and others helped make available there. So where is that developable land in Oregon? Well, the experts say it's nowhere. It does not exist, not in that size. That's why we did not stand a chance when Intel started looking around for a place to expand before they picked Ohio. And Ohio, don't get me wrong, did jolt our state leaders into action. And now they do have a plan. They're not tearing up all the land use rules. They just want to give Governor Kotek the authority to cut through all the red tape and restrictions. The latest amendments to the bill, expected to be adopted tomorrow, would let the governor designate a total of 12 parcels of land, 2 parcels of any size, 4 that are 500 acres, and another 6 that are 100 acres. That's land that would be available for semiconductor chip plants. And that's it. And it has to be next to the existing urban growth boundary of a city. And there has to be at least one public hearing before the governor makes her decision. Now, in my opinion, if you think that hearing will change the governor's mind, I have a lovely bridge in London I'd like to sell you. But back to the main point. You might argue that once we begin down this slippery slope, there will be one exception after the other until the thing, the urban growth boundary, is just a toothless tiger. I hope not, and I don't think so. I really don't think that's going to happen. However, I do think there is a risk of more tinkering with it as the governor pushes for more and more housing to be built. That may expand it as well during this session. But it's not a bad thing to make exceptions from time to time. The growth boundary has served us all very well. But there's nothing wrong with changing a law put in place 50 years ago to meet the modern needs of our state today. And when it comes to the tech industry, I think that this one-time deal, and Democrats who love environmental causes and preservation of land, they're likely gritting their teeth as they push this thing through. And that should tell you just how important it is to the future of Oregon. We need industry. We need good-paying jobs here. Those Intel jobs in Ohio, they're going to pay an average of $135,000 a year. Now, some of you have asked, why not build a plant or 2 in Central Oregon or Eastern Oregon or Southern Oregon, where there's lots of open land? Well, the experts say it's because the big companies need, among other things, gobs of electricity and access to an international airport. The greater Portland area is where you find that. Sorry, but it's true. At the end of the day, by the way, it doesn't really matter what I think. Lawmakers in Salem have already decided this is crucial to Oregon's future, and it's moving quickly through the system. I frankly think it's already a done deal. Done in the name of the future of prosperity for the state of Oregon. That's my opinion anyway. What's yours? You don't have to agree with me. Send me an email. Light me up. I'm ready. You can add, our address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Coming up next on The Story, Governor Kotek's homeless state of emergency only included counties that met a certain threshold when it comes to rates of homelessness, but a county along the coast who was not originally included appealed and now is part of the initiative. What it means for them and why some other counties were left out and kept out. When The Story returns. Now to our homeless crisis. Clatsop County was recently added to the governor's homeless state of emergency after initially being shut out. It comes after weeks of petitioning and applying, and it's a big deal because it means they're now eligible for more money to get people housed. Blair Best reports from Astoria on what it means for their houseless response, and she also tells us about another county that petitioned but did not make the cut.
Every day at 12 o'clock, Ozark Orac feeds about 50 homeless people in Astoria.
We're donated hundreds of pounds of food a week.
Every Tuesday we have pizza.
Rob was homeless and now works at Lifeboat Services, one of the only groups in this corner of Clatsop County dedicated to helping the homeless.
It feels like filling empty bellies. Like we make people happy. A lot of it makes their day.
Clatsop County was just included in the governor's homelessness state of emergency.
It doesn't make sense in my opinion why we weren't included in the first place, but here we are and we definitely appreciate it.
They had to petition and apply to be included and were recently found to meet the criteria since they declared a local homelessness state of emergency, and the rate of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness last year was 99%, which exceeds the state minimum threshold of 80% or more.
The rates of homelessness per capita are highest in Clatsop County over all of Oregon.
Clatsop County was not the only rural area to ask to be included in the governor's homelessness state of emergency. Wasco County also applied, yet they were denied. The only thing getting in their way was that their rate of unsheltered homelessness last year was 71%, which is less than the state's minimum requirement of 80% or more. Yet they too are suffering from a lack of homeless services.
It's been a little backwards.
Now, with the state's help, this vacant inn off Marine Drive will soon be converted into Astoria's first overnight emergency shelter.
This shelter it's a necessity. They have to have it.
Even if you were to open, say, overnight shelters, would there still be people falling through the cracks? I mean, how many shelters would you need?
There's absolutely going to be people falling through the cracks no matter what we do, but if we don't start somewhere, then nothing's ever going to happen and the problem's only going to get worse.
The governor's office says they will reach out to Clatsop County soon to begin the emergency response. Governor Kotek wants to remind the counties not included in the state of emergency that it doesn't mean they won't receive money through her other investment packages aimed at reducing homelessness statewide. In Astoria, Blair Best, KGW News.
All right, thanks, Blair. Glad those folks are getting included, at least in Astoria. Up next on the story, too many of our neighbors aren't sure where their next meal is coming from, and our food drive is underway to try and fight hunger in our area. How you can help out when the story returns. Do you have a Roku or Amazon Fire? If you do, you can watch today's show, plus previous shows and segments anytime on our streaming service. Go to your Roku or Fire homepage and add KGW Plus to your home screen, and then let us know what you think. The KGW Food Drive is underway. So far, we've provided 250,000 meals with your help, and our goal is 1.2 million. Here's how to make a difference. Just aim your camera on your phone at the QR code that's there on your screen, and you can donate at the Oregon Food Bank. You can also, at the Oregon Food Bank, and $10 means 30 meals. All right, hope we got that straight. $10, 30 meals. And all this week, when you give at Rivermark Community Credit Union, we'll double your donation. To see all the ways to donate, or if you need assistance, visit kgw.com/fooddrive. We also want to thank local Toyota dealers, Pacific Office Automation, and Safeway for supporting this year's food drive. All right, keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com. We're going to wrap things up right after this. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the story, our story, well, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow night.
This is